The wedding was beautiful, at least on the outside. String lights curled through the garden trees like fairy dust had been poured from above. Music floated in the air, and the scent of lavender and fresh roses filled every breath. But under all the celebration, there was something bitter clinging to my skin. It wasn't nerves. It was the whispers, the laughter, the cruel kind that comes with smug glances and hidden grins. I stood near the altar, dressed in ivory lace and trembling joy, holding his hand, Daniel's hand. My husband. He looked so calm, so at ease, like the entire world couldn't touch us. His suit was simple, his tie a bit crooked, and his shoes weren't some designer name. But his eyes? His eyes held me like I was the only thing that mattered. That's when I heard it again. "She's throwing her life away," my father said, loud enough for the third row to hear. "Marrying a guy who probably can't even pay for his own tux." My mother laughed with a tightness in her throat. We told her. But of course, she wouldn't listen. Just had to follow her heart. Their words didn't hurt as much as the way people looked at Daniel afterward. Some with pity, others with mockery. And some just turned away, like the whole thing was a sad story unfolding in real time. Daniel squeezed my hand, whispering low, "Don't let them ruin this. This day, it's ours, not theirs." I smiled at him, genuinely, warmly, and nodded. I wouldn't let them win. But my smile shattered when my uncle leaned over to someone and chuckled, "Can't wait to see how long this one lasts." The music swelled. I walked down the aisle with Daniel beside me, every step layered in a mix of shame and pride. I didn't regret choosing him, but I regretted inviting most of the people here. At the reception, things only got worse. My cousin Michelle actually clinked her glass, stood up, and made a joke toast. "To Natalie," she said, raising her champagne flute, "for choosing love over logic. For choosing whatever this is over a secure future." She giggled. Bold move. I felt my chest tighten. Daniel looked down at his plate and said nothing. I wanted to speak, to say something, to defend him, to scream. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I whispered, "Excuse me," stood up and walked outside. I needed air before I broke in front of everyone. The cool wind slapped my face the moment I stepped out. I stood near the hedge, trying not to cry. My wedding day, and they were treating it like a mistake they were all forced to watch. That's when I heard the blades. A soft, growing rhythm in the air, like a heart thumping in the sky. And then I saw it. A sleek, jet-black helicopter gliding through the clouds, moving closer. People started pointing, murmuring. The music stopped. Even Michelle's annoying laugh died in her throat. The helicopter circled once, then gently lowered onto the large open lawn behind the garden. Everyone stood frozen. My dad whispered, "What the hell?" The door of the chopper opened, and out stepped a man in a clean black uniform, Daniel's assistant, Malik. He walked with purpose, holding a small velvet box in one hand and a tablet in the other. His voice was calm, but it carried through the stunned silence. "Mr. Daniel Rowan," Malik announced, approaching us slowly. "The board meeting is ready. They're waiting for your confirmation." Daniel stood, brushing imaginary lint off his jacket like it was nothing. And then he turned to me, kissed my cheek, and said, "I'll only be gone for 20 minutes. They're voting on the final merger." Everyone looked at him like they'd seen a ghost. "Merger?" My dad blurted. Daniel nodded, calm as ever. "Yeah. The acquisition of Altair Global. It closes today. Sorry for the interruption." He turned to his assistant. "Hold them for 5 more minutes. I need to finish dessert with my wife." My mom dropped her fork. My cousin sat down slowly, blinking at him. And me? I just smiled. Because finally, they saw what I had always known. He wasn't who they thought. And the best part? He had never needed to prove it. He just was. The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. You could hear the clink of a spoon dropping on fine china from across the garden. Eyes darted from Daniel to Malik to the helicopter, and then back to me. I stood in my gown, the breeze catching the veil behind me, and for the first time that day, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel pitted. I felt seen. Daniel sat down like nothing had happened, pulled the chair next to him closer, and invited me to sit. I did, the corners of my mouth tugging at a knowing smile I no longer had to hide. "Altair Global," my uncle stammered. "That Altair?" Daniel nodded casually, sipping his water.
"Yeah.
One of the few renewable energy giants still privately held. But not for long. My father leaned forward, red creeping into his cheeks. "You mean you work for them?" Daniel's eyes never flinched. "I own controlling shares. I bought out the founder's private stake earlier this year. The board is finalizing a public-private merger. I'll retain executive control." You could practically hear jaws hit the table. Michelle's champagne flute slipped slightly in her hand. "Wait, what? But you said you were in consulting." "I am," Daniel said. "Private wealth, strategic transitions, legacy investing." It's niche. My mother blinked, her lipstick slightly smudged, still holding the spoon midair. "So you're not broke?" Daniel chuckled gently. Not smugly. Just softly, like the answer should have been obvious all along.
"No, ma'am."
Not even close. Then he turned to me, only me, and said, "I just didn't think anyone's net worth should matter more than their worth to you." I swallowed hard. There it was again. That quiet, steady way he had of reminding me what love actually looked like. Not flashy, not loud, but true. The waiter came by with cake. No one touched theirs. My dad suddenly stood. "Why didn't you tell us?" Daniel's voice didn't rise. "Because Natalie asked me not to. She didn't want anyone thinking this wedding was about anything but love." Everyone turned to look at me. I felt the weight of their gazes, the stunned curiosity, the shame slowly creeping onto their own faces. "I wanted to marry a man who treated me with respect," I said, voice steady. "Not someone who flaunted wealth to win approval." Daniel reached for my hand. I didn't hesitate this time. My cousin Michelle, still blinking like she'd just awakened from a strange dream, stammered, "So, you're, like, rich? Daniel smiled. "We don't really talk like that in my business circles. But yes, you could say that." Someone behind us finally dared to whisper, "That's her husband?" And another, "I thought he drove a beat-up Camry?"
He did.
That was the beauty of it. Daniel chose simplicity. He wore no branded suits, avoided the spotlight, never bragged. Not because he was hiding, but because he didn't need validation. Especially not from people who judged worth by wallet size. As Daniel rose from his seat to take the call from the boardroom on his jet, my father tried again. "Look, son, we didn't know." "You didn't care to," I interrupted.
Calmly. Clearly.
"You made up your mind when you saw he didn't fit your box." He paused, then nodded slowly. "Maybe we were wrong." Daniel looked back at them with the same kindness I'd always admired in him. "Maybe you weren't wrong," he said. "Maybe you just didn't wait long enough to be right." Then he turned back toward the chopper, Malik following, tablet glowing. Everyone watched him go. The man they laughed at. The man they pitied. Now they couldn't even meet his eyes. I turned to my mom and dad. "You asked me why I never brought him to dinner. That's why." They were speechless. And it was oddly peaceful. As the helicopter lifted off, I stood and walked slowly back inside. My guests parted like water around a rock. No one laughed now. No one whispered. Because when you stand in your truth, when you love someone for who they are, not what they look like on paper, the world notices. And sometimes it lands in a helicopter just to prove a point. The helicopter disappeared into the clouds, its blades echoing like the fading heartbeat of a moment none of them would ever forget. I stayed outside for a few seconds longer, letting the wind lift the edge of my gown, my fingers still tingling from Daniel's touch. When I stepped back into the reception hall, it was as if the room itself had changed shape. The colors were the same. The lights still twinkled. But the expressions, those had shifted. Gone were the smug glances, the arrogant smirks. All that remained were wide eyes, twitching mouths, and a collective effort not to choke on their own pride. And suddenly, they didn't know how to treat me anymore. My cousin Riley, who earlier avoided introducing her fiancé to us, now walked over like we'd always been close. "Nat, babe, Why didn't you tell us? I mean, seriously, this is like Hollywood-level drama. I smiled politely. It wasn't about drama. It was about love. She tried to laugh, but it was strained.
Right. Right.
But still, dang, girl. My Aunt Charlotte leaned in, whispering, I always said you had good instincts.
A lie.
She once told my mother I lacked taste because I didn't chase after doctors or hedge fund babies. I remembered. Everyone remembered. Daniel didn't need revenge. Their own words had become it. I made my way to the bridal table, sitting in the chair Daniel had vacated. My mother approached, slow and hesitant, like she was finally unsure of her role in my life. You could have told me, Natalie, she murmured. I turned toward her, meeting her eyes. And if I had, I asked softly, would you have loved him more? Or just pretended to? She didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. The value of a man should never have been a dollar amount. But to them, it always was. Until now. He's kind. I continued. He brings me tea when I'm sick. He listens to me ramble when I can't sleep. He takes care of his employees like their family. That's who I married. Tears welled in her eyes, but not the kind you'd expect. These weren't tears of guilt.
Not really.
They were tears of loss. Because in that moment, she realized she had judged a treasure and found herself lacking. Your father and I, she started, but her voice broke. We just wanted you to be taken care of. I know, I said gently, but you didn't trust that I could do that for myself, or that someone like Daniel could. My father stood nearby, pretending to fix his tie, but I could see him listening. His posture had changed. Shoulders slumped. No longer the proud patriarch, just a man who misjudged, deeply and publicly. A few more guests came by. Some tried flattery. Some offered awkward congratulations. Most just stayed quiet, realizing that anything they said might sound like backtracking. It was almost funny how quickly admiration replaced disdain. And all Daniel had to do was be himself. I pulled out my phone, heart fluttering as a message came in from him. Merger approved. Coming back to celebrate properly. Tell them not to eat all the cake. I laughed under my breath, but my hand shook. Because beneath all the glitter of this unexpected twist, something deeper stirred inside me. All those years of doubting my choices, second-guessing my heart because others didn't approve, they didn't matter anymore. Daniel didn't just marry me. He chose me, despite the noise, despite the pressure, despite the whispers. And now, the people who claimed to love me most had to sit in the reality that they were the ones who needed to change. Kindness was what Daniel showed me. It's what I wanted to show them. But kindness wasn't weakness. Kindness could be the most powerful revenge of all. By the time Daniel returned, the entire tone of the wedding had shifted. Gone was the hushed gossip, the judgmental stares, the fake smiles veiled in pity. Now people stood straighter when he walked past. They smiled too wide. They offered their hands too quickly. You could almost smell the desperation to fix what they had broken just hours before. Daniel, of course, handled it with grace. The kind of grace that comes not from wealth, but from knowing exactly who you are. He took my hand the moment he stepped back into the reception hall, like nothing had changed, because in his heart, nothing had. He wasn't suddenly more powerful. He wasn't suddenly more desirable. He had always been that man. The world was just catching up. I miss the speeches, he whispered, leaning in with a smirk. Did your cousin get any funnier? I laughed. She choked on her own toast. It was poetic. He grinned, then kissed the back of my hand like it was the first time. The crowd watched closely, maybe waiting for him to slip up, maybe hoping to figure out how someone like him ended up with someone like me. But they missed the real story. We didn't marry to prove anything. We married because we already had. As the servers brought out slices of the triple layer cake, my father finally made his move. He approached the table with deliberate steps, clearing his throat like a man about to give a TED Talk. But what came out was softer, almost uncertain. I owe you both an apology. My fork paused midair. Daniel looked up, expression unreadable. My dad continued. I judged you before I knew you. I let assumptions cloud my heart, and he glanced at me, eyes heavier than I'd seen in years. I hurt my daughter in the process. I blinked. That part. I wasn't expecting. I was wrong, he finished. Daniel didn't rush to forgive. He let the moment settle. Then he nodded once and said, "Thank you." Not dramatic. Not condescending. Just sincere. "I hope," my dad added, "that maybe we can start over." I didn't say anything right away. There was so much I wanted to release, the pain, the anger, the years of trying to make them proud.
But I looked at Daniel.
At the way he was choosing peace over ego, kindness over triumph. And I realized we didn't need a dramatic confrontation. We needed healing. "I'm open to it," I said, finally. "But it has to be real this time." My father nodded, and for the first time, I believed him. Later that night, when most of the guests had gone home and the fairy lights blinked like lazy stars above us, Daniel and I slow danced alone in the garden. His hand rested on my waist, my head tucked against his chest. It was quiet, no music, no audience. Just us. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "They saw who you are today," I whispered. He held me a little tighter. "All that matters is you always did." I pulled back to look at him. "Thank you. For everything. For letting them figure it out on their own." He smiled, brushing hair from my face. "They needed to learn the hard way. And you deserved to see them learn." We stood like that for a long time, swaying, breathing, healing. And in that moment, under the soft hum of distant laughter and rustling leaves, I realized something. My wedding wasn't just about marrying the love of my life. It was about shedding the weight of everyone else's expectations. It was about choosing my path, even when no one else could see it. It was about love. And that love, it landed in a helicopter. 2 weeks later, we sat on the balcony of our new home, barefoot, sipping coffee with the city's skyline glittering in the distance. The wedding had come and gone, but the impact still echoed like distant thunder in family group chats and hushed conversations over brunch tables. They didn't talk about the flowers or the venue.
They talked about him.
The man they thought was a loser. The man who made them all pause, reflect, and question the way they measured worth. And me? They talked about me too, but differently now. They said things like she always had good intuition, or she was smart to keep it quiet. The tone had changed. But I didn't let their newfound respect define me, because I had already learned the most important lesson. Validation that comes late isn't validation at all. It's just people catching up. Daniel was in the kitchen making pancakes. Yes, the Daniel Rowan, multi-millionaire, boardroom slayer, helicopter rider, now wearing pajama pants with little foxes on them, humming while flipping flapjacks. "Why are you smiling like that?" he asked, glancing over. "Because you're ridiculous," I said, laughing softly. "And also perfect." He carried over a plate like it was a treasure, setting it before me with a theatrical bow. For the woman who didn't care about my money, but still ended up with all of it. I laughed. That's one way to summarize our love story. But deep down, we both knew it wasn't about the money. It was about moments, values, the quiet things, like how he texted me before every big meeting just to say, "You've got this." Like how I'd sit on the bathroom floor beside him when his anxiety flared up after high-stakes calls, because yes, even men with helicopters feel small sometimes. Like how we promised each other, during one midnight walk long before the wedding, no matter how loud the world gets, we'll listen to each other first. That was the vow that mattered most. The public now saw Daniel differently. He was profiled in business magazines, invited to podcasts. One reporter called me the wife who stayed silent through the storm. Another tried to romanticize the whole thing, saying it was a real-life Cinderella story. But I wasn't rescued. I chose. And so did he. Months later, at a quiet family dinner, just us, my parents, and Daniel, my father poured him a glass of wine and said with careful gratitude, "You turned out to be the man we didn't know we needed." Daniel simply replied, "I was always that man. You just didn't know how to see him." And my mother, eyes glassy, placed her hand on mine and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on us, even when we didn't deserve it." It didn't erase the past, but it softened it. That night, I found a letter tucked in my purse. It was from Daniel. He had written it the night before our wedding but never gave it to me until now. It said, "If they laugh, let them. If they doubt me, let them. If they walk away from you because of me, I'll build a world so safe, so real, that you'll never need to look back. Not because they don't matter, but because you finally know you do." I cried, not because I was sad, but because this man, this so-called loser, had rewritten everything I thought I knew about strength. It didn't live in revenge. It lived in quiet integrity. It didn't roar in the face of cruelty. It endured, then rose. So, if you ever find yourself standing in a room where no one believes in the person beside you, don't shout. Don't fight to convince them. Just hold their hand tighter. Because sometimes love's loudest answer comes in the form of a helicopter landing on a lawn full of doubters.
Liam Haynes leaned back against the sleek leather interior of his car, the engine humming beneath him like a beast waiting to be unleashed. The city lights blurred as he pressed the accelerator, the roar of the engine drowning out the protests of his passenger. "Liam, slow down," his friend, Ryan, shouted over the wind. "Relax." Liam grinned, his dark hair whipping across his forehead. "We're just having fun." The streets of downtown gleamed with rain-slick pavement as Liam swerved dangerously close to the curb. His Maserati skidded into a perfect drift, earning cheers from the group of onlookers gathered at the illegal street race. But the moment of triumph was short-lived. Blue and red lights flashed in the distance, accompanied by the wail of sirens. "Cops!" Ryan yelled. Liam's grin didn't waver. "Then let's give them a show." The night ended in disaster. Liam was dragged home by the police, his father's face dark with fury as he bailed him out yet again. "This is the third time this month, Liam," Robert Haynes said, his voice tight with restrained anger. "When are you going to grow up?" Liam shrugged, leaning lazily against the doorway. "I told you, Dad. I was just having fun." "Fun?" Robert's fist slammed onto the mahogany desk, making Eleanor flinch. "You've turned this family into a laughingstock. Do you have any idea what the media is saying about us?" Eleanor stepped in, her voice softer but no less stern. "Liam, you're not a child anymore. Your actions have consequences, not just for you but for all of us. Nate looks up to you. Is this the example you want to set for him?" Liam's younger brother, Nate, peeked around the corner, his wide eyes filled with both admiration and fear. Liam glanced at him but quickly looked away, guilt briefly flickering across his face before he pushed it down. "What do you want me to do?" Liam asked, his tone sarcastic. "Quit living my life and become your perfect little puppet?" Robert's jaw tightened. "You've left me no choice. If you won't take responsibility on your own, I'll make you." Liam sat in stunned silence as his father laid out the plan. "You're going to marry Emma," Robert said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "The maid," Liam scoffed, his disbelief quickly turning into anger. "You've lost your mind. She's the only one in this house who knows the meaning of hard work," Robert said. "And maybe, just maybe, she'll teach you something about humility." Liam turned to his mother, hoping for support, but Eleanor simply sighed. "This isn't just about teaching you a lesson, Liam. It's about protecting this family. Your actions have put us all at risk, and we need stability." "Stability?" Liam laughed bitterly. "You think forcing me to marry some nobody is going to fix everything?" Eleanor's gaze hardened. "That nobody saved your brother's life when you couldn't be bothered to answer your phone." Liam froze. "What?" Eleanor's voice softened, but the weight of her words was crushing. "The night Nate had that fever, none of us could reach you. Emma stayed with him all night, cooling his fever and keeping him alive until the doctor arrived." Liam swallowed hard, the guilt he had buried deep finally clawing its way to the surface. The next morning, Liam wandered into the garden, his mood sour. He had barely slept after his parents' ultimatum, and now he was expected to meet the woman who was supposed to fix him. The absurdity of it all made his blood boil. Emma was trimming the hedges, her hair tied back in a loose braid. She worked methodically, her focus entirely on the task at hand. She didn't notice Liam until he cleared his throat. "Hey," he said, crossing his arms. Emma looked up, startled. Her eyes, a calm shade of gray, met his. "Mr. Haynes," she said softly, straightening. "Did you need something?" Liam frowned. "Don't call me that. It's Liam." She nodded but didn't respond, waiting for him to speak. "So," he said, awkwardly shoving his hands into his pockets. "You're the one they want me to marry?" Emma's expression barely changed, but Liam thought he saw a flicker of discomfort. "Yes," she said simply. He studied her for a moment, searching for some sign of ambition or manipulation. "And you're okay with this? Marrying someone you don't even know?" Emma hesitated, then shrugged. "It's not about what I want. Your parents think this is best for you. For the family." Liam laughed bitterly. "Right? Because the family name is all that matters." Emma turned back to the hedge, her voice quiet but firm. "You can think what you want, but this isn't about me. It's about you. And if I'm being honest, I don't think you're ready for it." Her words struck a nerve. Liam opened his mouth to argue, but she had already returned to her work, dismissing him as if he didn't matter. Over the next few days, Liam watched Emma from a distance. She moved through the mansion with quiet efficiency, her presence almost invisible. Yet, everyone seemed to respect her, something Liam couldn't quite understand. She was just a maid after all. What made her so special? One afternoon, Liam found her in the kitchen, scrubbing a stubborn pan. He leaned against the doorway, his curiosity finally outweighing his irritation. "Do you ever take a break?" he asked. Emma glanced at him briefly before returning to her task. "Not really." "Why not?" he pressed. "My parents pay you, right? You could probably slack off and get away with it." Emma set the pan down and turned to face him. "Is that what you do?" Liam blinked, caught off guard. "Well, yeah, probably. That's the difference between us," Emma said calmly. "I take pride in my work, even if it's just scrubbing pans." Her words stung more than Liam cared to admit. He left the kitchen without another word, but her quiet strength lingered in his mind. The engagement announcement was fast approaching, and the pressure in the Haynes household was palpable. Robert and Eleanor insisted on a grand party, inviting business partners, socialites, and the media to witness the union that would supposedly save their family's reputation. Emma, meanwhile, kept her head down, enduring the whispers and judgmental stares of the other staff. She had expected resistance, but the weight of it was heavier than she anticipated. Liam, on the other hand, grew increasingly restless. He hated the idea of being paraded around like a trophy, and he hated even more that Emma seemed so indifferent to it all. "You don't have to just take this, you know," he told her one evening as they set up for the party. Emma glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "What do you mean?" "This whole arrangement," Liam said. "You could fight back. Say no." Emma sighed. "And what would that accomplish? Your parents would still find a way to force you into something you don't want. At least this way, we both know where we stand." Liam frowned, frustrated by her logic. "You're too passive, and you're too impulsive," she shot back. "Maybe that's why this might actually work." The engagement dinner was a lavish affair. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, and the air buzzed with the chatter of the Haynes family's wealthy guests. Liam and Emma sat side by side at the head table, their awkward silence masked by polite smiles. As the night wore on, Liam grew more and more agitated. He could feel the judgmental eyes of the guests, hear their whispers about Emma's background and his reputation. "She's the maid, isn't she?" one woman murmured. "What a scandal," another said. "But I suppose the Haynes family had to do something to rein him in." Liam's grip on his wine glass tightened. He glanced at Emma, expecting her to look embarrassed or upset, but she sat calmly, her expression unreadable. After the dinner, Liam confronted her in the hallway. "Doesn't it bother you?" he demanded. "Does what bother me?" Emma asked. "The way they talk about you, like you don't belong here." Emma's gaze softened, but her voice remained steady. I've heard worse. And honestly, they're right. I don't belong here. Liam frowned. Then why? Because sometimes, she interrupted, you have to do things you don't want to survive. You, of all people, should understand that. Liam had no response. For the first time, he saw Emma not as the quiet maid forced into his life, but as someone who had faced struggles he couldn't begin to imagine. Unbeknownst to either of them, danger was already closing in. Victor, the man Emma had spent years running from, had finally found her. He stood in the shadows of the mansion's garden that evening, his dark eyes fixed on the windows where the engagement dinner was winding down. She thought she could hide. He murmured to himself, but I always find what's mine. Victor didn't wait long to make his presence known. The following evening, while most of the staff were preparing for a charity gala, Emma found a small envelope slipped under her door. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The handwriting was unmistakable, Victor's jagged scrawl. Inside was a single note, you can't run forever. I'll see you soon. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. For a moment, the room seemed to close in around her. She thought she had escaped him. She thought the Haynes mansion was her sanctuary. But now, the walls that once felt protective seemed to trap her. She stuffed the note into her pocket and left her room, her mind racing. She needed to warn someone to prepare. But who could she trust? Liam found Emma later that night, pacing the back garden. The moonlight cast a silvery glow on her face, and he noticed the tension in her shoulders. You're not exactly subtle, he said, leaning against a nearby tree. Emma jumped, spinning to face him. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, he replied. You've been acting weird all day. What's going on? Emma hesitated. She had spent the past few months keeping her past buried, determined to keep the Haynes family out of her problems. But as she looked at Liam, she realized that he wasn't the same careless man she had met weeks ago. There was something different about him now, something that made her think he might actually listen. It's someone from my past, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. He's dangerous, and he found me. Liam straightened, his playful demeanor vanishing. Who? What does he want? Emma sighed, her hands trembling. His name is Victor. I used to work for him, if you can call it that. He ran a criminal operation and I found out what he was doing. When I tried to leave, he didn't take it well. So, I turned him in. And now he's out for revenge. Liam finished, his voice tight. Emma nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I thought I could start over here. But now, I don't know if I'm safe anymore. Liam's jaw tightened. You're safe, he said firmly. As long as I'm here, no one's going to hurt you. The charity gala the following night was a glittering affair, with the who's who of the city gathered in the mansion's grand ballroom. Liam spent most of the evening keeping an eye on Emma, who was helping manage the event from behind the scenes. She looked calm, composed, but he could see the nervous energy beneath her exterior. Halfway through the night, Liam's instincts were proven right. Out of the corner of his eye, he spotted a man slipping through the crowd, his face partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. There was something about his posture, the way he moved, that set Liam on edge. It wasn't long before the man found Emma in the garden, where she was taking a moment to breathe. Well, Victor said, stepping out of the shadows. The runaway bride. Emma's blood ran cold. Victor, she said, her voice shaking. I told you I'd find you, he sneered. You've been playing house with the Haynes family, haven't you? Thought their money would keep you safe? Before she could respond, Liam appeared behind her. His voice was low, dangerous. You need to leave. Now. Victor smirked, clearly unimpressed. And who are you? The babysitter. I'm the guy who's going to make sure you never come near her again. Liam shot back, stepping between Victor and Emma. Victor chuckled. You've got guts, kid. I'll give you that. But you have no idea what you're getting into. Liam didn't waver. Try me. Before the situation could escalate further, security arrived, alerted by Liam's earlier suspicion. Victor was escorted off the property, but his parting words sent a chill through the air. This isn't over, Elena. Not by a long shot. After Victor's departure, Emma broke down in the library, the weight of her fear finally overwhelming her. Liam found her there, curled up in an armchair, her face buried in her hands. "Hey," he said softly, sitting across from her. "It's okay. He's gone. For now," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "But he'll come back. He always does." Liam reached out, hesitating for a moment before placing a hand on hers. "Then we'll deal with him. Together." Emma looked up, her tear-streaked face filled with doubt. "Why do you care? This isn't your problem." "Because you're not just the maid to me anymore," Liam said. You're more than that. And I'm not going to let anyone hurt you." For the first time, Emma saw a side of Liam she hadn't expected. Protective, vulnerable, and genuine. Over the next few weeks, Liam and Emma worked together to prepare for Victor's inevitable return. Liam reached out to his father's contacts in law enforcement, sharing what little Emma could remember about Victor's operation. Meanwhile, Emma dug through her old files, hoping to find anything that could bring Victor down for good. Their late-night strategy sessions in the library became a strange routine. They argued, laughed, and shared stories about their lives, slowly building a bond neither of them had expected. One night, as they pored over documents, Liam leaned back in his chair and studied Emma. "You're stronger than you think, he said. Emma looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you've been through hell, and you're still standing," Liam said. "That's more than I can say for a lot of people." Emma smiled faintly, her walls beginning to crack. "You're not as shallow as I thought you were." "Careful," Liam teased. "You're starting to sound like you actually like me." Emma rolled her eyes, but the warmth in her gaze lingered. Victor didn't wait long to strike again. One evening, as Liam was heading to a business meeting, his car was sabotaged. The brakes failed, sending him skidding dangerously close to a collision. He managed to escape unscathed, but the message was clear. Victor wasn't just targeting Emma anymore. When Liam returned to the mansion, he found Emma waiting for him in the foyer, her face pale with worry. "What happened?" she asked. "Victor," Liam said grimly. "He's stepping up his game." Emma's hands clenched into fists. "This is my fault. He's after me, not you." Liam shook his head. "He made it my problem the moment he came after you. We're in this together now, Emma." The tension reaches a boiling point when Victor kidnaps Nate to lure Emma out of hiding. The final showdown takes place in an abandoned warehouse, where Liam and Emma, backed by law enforcement, face Victor and his men. The stakes are higher than ever, with Nate's life hanging in the balance. The Haynes family's worst fears were realized when Nate disappeared. It happened on a rainy evening, just as the family sat down for dinner. A maid rushed into the dining room, pale and shaking. "Nate's gone," she stammered. "We found his room empty, and this was on his bed." She handed Robert a small envelope. Inside was a photograph of Nate, tied to a chair, his face streaked with tears. Beneath it, a single sentence scrawled in sharp black ink. "Bring Elena. Come alone, or the boy dies." Emma's hand flew to her mouth as her knees nearly buckled. Liam was at her side instantly, steadying her. "It's him," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Victor." Robert slammed the note onto the table. "Call the police," he barked. "No," Emma blurted out. "He said to come alone. If he sees the police, he'll hurt Nate." Liam stepped forward, his jaw tight. "We're not doing this his way. We're going to find Nate and we're going to end this." The family gathered in the study, the air thick with tension. Robert paced back and forth, barking orders into his phone, while Eleanor sat in stunned silence, clutching a photograph of Nate. Liam leaned over a map spread across the desk. "He said to come alone," he muttered. "That means he's expecting you, Emma." Emma paled. "You're not seriously suggesting I go?" "It's a trap," Liam said. "But if we play this right, we can turn it against him." Robert looked up, his face grim. "We don't have time for half-baked plans, Liam. My son is out there, and he's my brother," Liam snapped. "You think I'm going to sit here and let Victor win?" The two men locked eyes, but it was Emma who broke the silence. "I'll do it," she said softly. Everyone turned to her, stunned. I'll go to him, Emma continued, her voice steady. If it means saving Nate, I'll do whatever it takes. No, Liam said firmly. You're not doing this alone. Emma looked at him, her eyes filled with both fear and determination. Then what do we do? The address Victor had included in the note led them to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. It was a sprawling, decaying structure, its windows broken and its walls covered in graffiti. The air was thick with the smell of rust and oil. Emma stepped out of the car first, her heart pounding. She could see Victor's silhouette through the broken glass of the upper windows. A single flickering light inside cast eerie shadows across the room. Liam followed close behind, ignoring Emma's protests. I told you, I'm not letting you do this alone, he said. Emma sighed but didn't argue. Together, they entered the warehouse, their footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. Victor's voice rang out from the shadows. Ah, Elena. Right on time. The sound of Nate's muffled cries reached Emma's ears, and her heart sank. She spotted him tied to a chair in the center of the room, a single overhead bulb casting harsh light on his small, trembling form. Victor stepped into the light, flanked by two men armed with pistols. You've caused me a lot of trouble, Elena, he said, his smile cold. But tonight, it ends. Liam stepped in front of Emma, his body tense. Let the boy go, Victor. This is between you and her. Victor chuckled. Ah, the gallant fiancé. How noble of you. He gestured to his men. But I'm afraid it's too late for negotiations. As the men raised their weapons, a loud crash echoed through the warehouse. The sound of shattering glass drew everyone's attention to the upper windows, where a team of police officers burst in, rappelling down ropes with precision. You think I wouldn't call for backup? Liam said, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. Chaos erupted. Victor's men opened fire, their shots ringing out in the cavernous space. The police returned fire, their movements swift and coordinated. Liam grabbed Emma's hand and pulled her behind a stack of crates. Stay down, he ordered, his voice urgent. What about Nate? Emma cried. Liam peeked over the crates, his eyes scanning the room. Victor was dragging Nate toward the back exit, using the boy as a shield. I'll get him, Liam said, his voice firm. No! Emma grabbed his arm. It's too dangerous. Liam turned to her, his expression fierce. He's my brother. I'm not losing him. Liam's fists clenched as he squared off against Victor, the cold concrete floor beneath them slick with spilled oil. Victor was taller and more imposing, but Liam didn't back down. His mind raced. This wasn't just about saving Nate anymore. It was about proving to himself and to Emma that he could be the person they needed. Victor sneered. You're out of your depth, kid. Do you even know what kind of man you're dealing with? I don't care who you are, Liam shot back. You don't touch my family. With a sudden burst of speed, Victor lunged at Liam, sending them both crashing to the floor. Liam grunted as the impact knocked the wind out of him, but he managed to twist free, rolling to his feet. The fight was brutal. Victor's punches were heavy and unrelenting, but Liam fought with a ferocity fueled by desperation. He dodged a wild swing and countered with a solid punch to Victor's jaw, sending the older man staggering. Emma, meanwhile, worked frantically to untie Nate. The boy's sobs broke her heart, but she kept her voice steady. It's okay, Nate. I've got you. Just hold still. Emma, hurry. Liam called out, his voice strained as he blocked another blow from Victor. Finally, Emma freed Nate from the ropes. She pulled him into her arms, shielding him as the fight raged on. Stay behind me, sweetheart, she whispered, her hands trembling but steady. Victor growled, his eyes darting to Emma and Nate. You think this is over? He spat. I'll make you regret this. Liam saw the distraction and took his chance. With a surge of adrenaline, he grabbed a nearby metal rod and swung it at Victor's legs. The man crumpled to the ground with a pained shout. Not today, Liam muttered, panting as he stood over Victor. Police officers rushed in moments later, their weapons drawn. 2 officers cuffed Victor while the others secured his remaining men. Liam turned to Emma, his chest heaving. Is Nate okay? Emma nodded, her arms still wrapped protectively around the boy. He's safe, thanks to you. The days following Victor's capture were a blur of police reports, media coverage, and emotional recovery. The Haynes family, once fractured by mistrust and resentment, began to heal in the wake of the crisis. Robert and Eleanor, who had always struggled to connect with Liam, saw him in a new light. For the first time, Robert placed a hand on his son's shoulder and said, "I'm proud of you." Liam, unused to praise from his father, simply nodded. But the words stayed with him. Emma, meanwhile, found herself adjusting to a new reality. For years, she had lived in fear of Victor, always looking over her shoulder. Now, with him behind bars, she felt an unfamiliar sense of freedom. One evening, as she stood on the balcony overlooking the garden, Liam joined her. "You okay?" he asked, leaning on the railing beside her. Emma nodded. "It still feels strange. Not having to run anymore." Liam glanced at her, his expression soft. "You're not alone anymore, Emma. You don't have to face anything by yourself." She smiled, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, Liam, for everything." "You don't have to thank me," he said. "I should be thanking you. You've changed me more than I ever thought possible." The Haynes mansion was transformed into a haven of light and warmth for the wedding. The once forced arrangement had evolved into something genuine, something real. The guest list was small, just family and a few close friends, but the intimacy of the event made it all the more meaningful. Emma walked down the aisle in a simple but elegant gown, her steps steady and her heart full. Liam waited for her at the altar, his eyes never leaving hers. As the officiant spoke, Emma's thoughts drifted to everything they had overcome. Her fears, his recklessness, the danger that had almost torn them apart. But as she looked at Liam, she saw the man he had become. Strong, kind, and unflinchingly loyal. When it came time to exchange vows, Liam's voice was steady. "Emma, you've shown me what it means to be brave, to care about something bigger than myself. I promise to protect you, to stand by you, and to make you laugh when life feels too heavy. You're my reason to be better, and I'll never stop trying to deserve you." Emma's voice was soft but resolute. "Liam, you've taught me that not everyone runs when things get hard. You stayed when it mattered most, and you reminded me what it feels like to trust. I promise to stand by you, to believe in you, and to love you, for who you are and who you'll become." The applause was warm and genuine as they exchanged rings, sealing their vows. For the first time in their lives, both Liam and Emma felt like they belonged, together, as partners. In the weeks that followed, the Haynes family settled into a new rhythm. Liam took on more responsibility in the family business, proving to his father that he was ready to lead. Emma, no longer a maid, began exploring her own passions, finally free to dream about the future. One afternoon, as Liam and Emma walked hand in hand through the garden, Nate ran up to them, his face glowing with excitement. "Can we play soccer now?" he asked, tugging at Liam's sleeve. Liam grinned. "Only if you're ready to lose." Emma laughed, watching as the two brothers raced toward the open field. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace, a feeling that no matter what came next, they could face it together. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the garden in a warm golden glow, Emma knew that the life she had once dreamed of was finally within her reach. The sound of laughter echoed down the long hallway, bouncing off the marble floors like a cruel melody. Melissa stood frozen at the doorway, her hand still gripping the edge of the tray she was holding, a thin sheen of sweat forming on her forehead. The man sitting at the long, gleaming dining table, Chase Winters, was laughing at something one of his friends had said, and all eyes were on her. It was always like this. It always had been. "Look at her," one of his friends said, a sneer creeping into his voice. "How old are you, sweetheart? 16? 17? Melissa didn't answer. She never did. Instead, she lowered her gaze, trying to ignore the humiliation that prickled at the back of her neck. Her uniform, an unflattering maid's outfit, seemed to be the punchline of every joke. The silk gloves, the polished shoes, the apron. It all felt like a costume in a play she was forced to perform. Chase, the millionaire heir of the Winters empire, leaned back in his chair, swirling a glass of wine between his fingers as if he had all the time in the world. His eyes met hers, and for a split second, she saw something flicker in them. A hint of superiority, the belief that he was better than everyone else in the room. And then he smiled. "Tell me," he drawled, his voice rich and arrogant. "What's it like to be so insignificant?" The room fell silent. The comment stung, and though she wanted to scream, to defend herself, to throw that tray in his face, Melissa stood there perfectly still. What would be the point? In his world, she was nothing more than a ghost. She had been hired to serve him and his guests, to clean up after their messes, to make sure everything ran smoothly. And no matter how many times she tried to tell herself that it was just a job, that it didn't matter, the truth was, every time he mocked her, every time they belittled her, it chipped away at her. She wasn't supposed to be here. "Melissa," he said, leaning forward now, his smirk deepening. "Are you too stupid to answer?" She felt her face flush, her heart pounding, but she still didn't speak. Instead, she set the tray down on the table and quickly turned to leave. She couldn't take it anymore. She had to leave before the tears started to fall. But before she could get out of the room, he called after her, his voice laced with mockery. "What's the rush? Don't you want to hear the rest of the joke?" She gritted her teeth and kept walking. It had been a long time since Melissa had felt any sort of dignity in her life. Years of working in the shadows, cleaning after people who saw her as little more than a tool for their comfort. But the ridicule, Chase's mockery, had taken it to a new level. She hated the way he looked at her, the way he saw her as something to be used, something to be discarded. That night, she retreated to her tiny room at the back of the house, away from the laughter and the clinking of glasses, away from the world of wealth and privilege that seemed so far beyond her reach. The walls of her room were bare, save for a small cot and an old wooden dresser. The only light came from a flickering lamp on the nightstand. It was a stark contrast to the opulence of the Winters mansion, but it was the only world she knew. As she sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking, a thought began to form in her mind. A dangerous, thrilling thought. She had been nothing but a servant, but that didn't mean she had to stay in that role forever. She was strong, capable. She was smarter than anyone in that room tonight. And yet, every time they looked at her, they saw a maid. They saw someone below them. But what if she could change that? What if she could make them see her differently? She was done being their punching bag. The next morning, as she slipped into her uniform and tied her apron tightly, Melissa knew she was no longer the quiet, invisible maid. She had been broken, but now, she was ready to rise from the ashes. The world she lived in was about to change, and so was she. It was a few days later when the knock came. Melissa had just finished cleaning the guest bathrooms when she heard the sound. The knock echoed through the house, and something in her chest tightened. She knew who it was before she even saw him. Chase Winters. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't flinch. She was ready for this. She had a plan now. She opened the door slowly, her hands steady, her face blank. Chase stood there, dressed in his usual tailored suit, a confident smirk on his face. But there was something different in his eyes, a flicker of curiosity, perhaps even a hint of concern. "What do you want, Mr. Winters?" Melissa asked, her voice colder than usual. His eyebrow quirked at the formality. "I came to apologize," he said, his voice dripping with insincerity. "For last night. I didn't mean to upset you." She didn't believe him. Not for a second. Chase Winters didn't apologize. He never had. But the lie was exactly what she needed. "Oh, it's quite all right," she replied, her voice smooth. "I'm used to it." He stepped forward, his eyes studying her intently. "I'm serious," he said, his tone a little more earnest than before. "I know I've been a bit of an ass. Let me make it up to you. Dinner tonight? Just you and me?" The words hit her like a slap, and she fought to hide her reaction. Was he really offering her dinner? Was he trying to make amends? She could see right through it. He wasn't apologizing, he was playing a game. But she wasn't going to back down now. She wasn't the same person she had been when she first walked into this house. "I'd love to," she said, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. That night, she arrived at the lavish dining room, her heart beating in her chest. The dinner table was set for two, just her and Chase. The rich, dimly lit chandelier above cast shadows across his face, and she could see the faint glimmer of uncertainty in his eyes. He didn't know it yet, but tonight would be the start of his downfall. She took a seat across from him, her posture perfect, her eyes steady. "You wanted to make it up to me, Mr. Winters. I'm curious. What could you possibly offer that would make up for everything you've put me through?" Chase's smirk faltered for a moment, and she saw the crack in his armor. "I was thinking more along the lines of a fresh start," he said, his voice lowering. "Maybe we could start over?" Melissa didn't respond immediately. Instead, she picked up her wine glass, taking a slow sip as she studied him. The silence stretched on, heavy with tension, before she finally spoke. "You want to start over?" she repeated. "Interesting. But you see, Mr. Winters, I don't need a fresh start. What I need is something you can't give me." A flicker of confusion passed over his face, and she could see him struggling to keep his composure. He wasn't used to being challenged. "Tell me what you want, Melissa," he said, leaning forward, his voice soft but insistent. "Anything. It's yours." She set her glass down, her eyes never leaving his. "What I want is for you to understand the consequences of your actions," she said, her voice calm, but filled with an intensity that made his chest tighten. "I want you to know what it feels like to be insignificant, to be nothing, to be the one everyone looks down on. And then, I want you to see what happens when you underestimate someone." Chase froze. His confident facade cracked, and for the first time he saw her, not as the maid, but as something more dangerous, something he hadn't accounted for. The power shifted in that moment. "You're making a mistake, Melissa," he said, his voice now tinged with unease. "No," she replied, her voice steady. "You made the mistake, and now you're going to learn how it feels to lose everything." Chase's eyes widened for a brief second, his lips parted, but he didn't know how to respond. For the first time, Melissa saw the cracks in his armor, the facade of the wealthy, arrogant man beginning to break down. But she wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping lower, each word laced with calm precision. "You think this is a game, don't you? That you can make a joke out of people like me, mock me, belittle me, and that's the end of it. But it's not. I'm not going to let you get away with it." Chase tried to mask his discomfort with a forced smile, but it was too late. The seed of doubt had been planted. He was no longer in control. Melissa was the one pulling the strings now. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his fingers drumming nervously on the edge of his wine glass. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but this isn't you. You're just a maid. You don't have the power to do anything to me." The words stung, but they didn't faze her. She had heard it all before. The same insults, the same belittling tone. But now the roles had reversed. "Don't mistake my silence for weakness, Chase," she said, her eyes locking with his. "The truth is, I've been waiting for the right moment. And now that I've got your attention, it's time for you to see just how far you've pushed me." He laughed nervously, clearly trying to regain his composure. "You really think you can take me down? You're nothing but a pawn in my world. You're replaceable, disposable." The words cut through her like a knife, but she wasn't intimidated anymore. Not after everything she had endured in this house. Not after every insult, every cruel remark, every time they had looked down on her. Melissa stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor as she walked toward the window, her back to him. The view of the city lights below was breathtaking, but it didn't matter. Nothing did except for the next step in her plan. "You're right about one thing," she said quietly, turning back toward him. "I'm nothing in your world, but you know what? Your world isn't the only one that matters." Chase's eyebrows furrowed, and he straightened in his chair, suddenly on edge. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" Melissa's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "It means, Chase, that I'm done being underestimated. I'm done being your joke. You've made me believe for too long that I don't have power, but I do. And you're about to see just how much of it I've been holding on to." She walked back to the table, her steps confident now, and took a seat, never breaking eye contact. The tension between them was palpable, thick in the air. "Let's see what happens when I start using the power that you think I don't have." The following days were a blur for Melissa. She didn't have time to waste. She was calculating every move, every word, every interaction, building her plan in the shadows while Chase continued to treat her as nothing more than a maid. But in her mind, the game had already begun. One evening, as the sun began to set, Chase was in his study, and Melissa stood at the doorway, a soft knock echoing in the silence. She could hear him muttering to himself, probably working on yet another business deal, oblivious to the storm that was brewing outside his perfect little world. "Come in," he called, his voice authoritative but distracted. Melissa pushed the door open just enough to slip inside, her presence subtle but deliberate. She walked into the room slowly, taking in the opulence of the space. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, expensive leather furniture, a desk covered with papers and important documents. Everything screamed wealth, power, control. Everything except for her. She cleared her throat lightly, catching his attention. "I have something for you," she said, her tone soft but laced with purpose. Chase looked up from his desk, the usual smirk crossing his face as he took in her presence. "Oh, what's this? Another surprise?" Melissa didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped forward and set a folder down in front of him. The papers inside were thick with legal jargon, carefully prepared, meticulously researched. "I thought you might want to know something," she said, her voice calm, almost conversational. "Something about the company you've been working so hard to build." Chase raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "What's this? A new business proposal?" She smiled, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "No, it's information. About you." His expression shifted. The hint of amusement vanished, replaced by a flicker of wariness. "What are you talking about?" Melissa leaned in slightly, her gaze never leaving his. "I know about the offshore accounts, the money you've been hiding, the deals you've been making under the table. You thought no one would ever find out, didn't you?" Chase's face paled, and he stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You're bluffing," he said, his voice low and sharp. "No," she said, her tone unwavering. "I'm not bluffing. I have everything here, Chase. All the evidence. If you want to keep your little empire intact, you'll start treating me with respect. If you don't, I'll make sure everything comes crashing down." He took a step back, his eyes darting to the folder in front of him, then to Melissa's calm face. For a moment, he looked like a man caught in a trap he couldn't escape. His mind raced, calculating his next move. But there was no escape. The trap was set. "You think you can control me?" he asked, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. Melissa stood her ground, her expression cold and firm. "I don't want to control you, Chase. I just want you to see what happens when you push someone too far." The following days brought a new kind of tension into the house. Chase Winters, the man who had once looked down on Melissa, was now in her grasp. The power had shifted, but Melissa wasn't done yet. She knew this was only the beginning. She had set the wheels of change in motion, and nothing would stop her now. She watched from the sidelines as Chase scrambled to protect his empire, but Melissa could see the cracks in his carefully built world. The calm facade was starting to crumble. Every phone call, every meeting, every interaction now had a hidden agenda. Melissa was in control, and she made sure he knew it. Chase tried to regain some of his footing by offering her more money, more privileges, more status. But none of it mattered. Melissa wasn't in this for the power or the wealth. She was in it for one thing, retribution. She wanted him to feel the humiliation she had felt all those years. She wanted him to understand what it felt like to be beneath someone else's heel. And slowly, as the days wore on, she began to see it. The cracks in Chase's armor deepened. The arrogance, once so strong, was now gone. It was replaced by something else, fear. Melissa was no longer invisible. She wasn't the maid. She wasn't the servant. She was the storm that would bring him to his knees. But she wasn't done yet. The days following Chase's realization that he was no longer in control were filled with tension. Every word he spoke seemed carefully measured, every step calculated. It was as though the man who once walked through life like a king, who thought nothing could touch him, had become a shadow of his former self. Melissa watched from the sidelines, her mind working tirelessly to ensure that she didn't just break him. She would make him understand. She was no longer the quiet, invisible maid. Now she was a force to be reckoned with. And while she had the upper hand, she had no intention of letting up. Her plan was unfolding perfectly, but she needed to stay patient. The final blow had to be precise. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the house grew quieter, Melissa knew it was time. She had been observing every interaction between Chase and his inner circle. She had gathered the evidence she needed, and now, she had to push him into a corner. Chase had started avoiding her, not because he wanted to, but because he knew that every interaction with her meant he was closer to the abyss. Every time their eyes met, he saw the woman he had mocked, belittled, and disrespected. And now, she was his reckoning. Melissa entered the lavish office where Chase sat, his back turned to her as he examined some files. Without a word, she stepped into his line of sight, standing tall, her gaze unwavering. He froze when he saw her, and for the first time, she saw the unease flicker in his eyes. "What do you want now?" he asked, his voice tinged with both arrogance and fear. She didn't respond immediately, allowing the silence to stretch between them, suffocating, heavy. Finally, she walked closer to the desk and placed a neatly folded piece of paper in front of him. "What's this?" he asked, his voice guarded. He had no idea what was coming. He never did. "It's over, Chase," she said, her voice calm but with an edge. "Everything. I've had enough. Your time is up." He picked up the paper, his eyes scanning the document. His face began to pale as he realized what she was holding. The truth was right there, in black and white, proof of the illegal dealings, the money laundering, the web of corruption he had so carefully hidden. This is nothing," he sputtered, his voice shaking. "You can't prove anything." Melissa smiled, a cold, confident smile. "You think that, don't you? But I've been one step ahead of you this entire time. I have all the proof, Chase. Every last bit of it." The air in the room seemed to crackle with tension. His hands trembled as he clutched the paper, his once unshakable confidence faltering. "You can't," he began, but she cut him off. "No, you can't," she said, her voice steady, cutting through his denial like a blade. "You thought you could walk all over me. You thought I was just some maid, some invisible part of your world that you could discard whenever you wanted. But here's the truth, Chase. You're not the powerful man you think you are. And now I'm the one who controls the game." She watched as his face turned red, his hands tightening into fists. The anger that had once been so intimidating now looked pathetic, desperate. He stood up, knocking over his chair in his haste, but Melissa didn't flinch. She stood her ground. "You think this is over?" he seethed, his voice rising in a controlled rage. "You think you can ruin me? You're just a maid." "I'm not just anything anymore," she interrupted. "I'm your reckoning." Her words struck him like a physical blow. He took a step back, his breathing heavy. He was no longer the man who held all the power. Melissa had turned the tables completely. He knew she was serious. He knew there was no way out of this, no way to escape the consequences of his actions. For the first time in his life, he felt small, insignificant, helpless. "Melissa," he said, his voice softer now, but tinged with desperation. "Please, please," she repeated, her voice low and almost mocking. "After everything you've done to me, after everything you've put me through, you think I'll show mercy?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was grasping at the edges of his power, but it was slipping through his fingers. The smug confidence he had once had was gone. He was broken. The consequences came swiftly. Melissa didn't waste time. She made sure the information she had gathered was sent to the right people: law enforcement, lawyers, journalists. She made sure every secret, every crime he had committed was exposed to the world. The same world he had manipulated and controlled for so long. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, meetings, and legal battles. Chase's empire began to crumble, piece by piece. His assets were frozen, his business partners turned against him, and the public turned their back on the man who had once been untouchable. And through it all, Melissa watched from the shadows. She didn't need the fame or the recognition. The satisfaction came from knowing that she had taken control of her life. She had used every weapon at her disposal, intelligence, patience, and sheer willpower, to take down the man who had wronged her. Chase's downfall was a spectacle. The man who had once mocked her, who had humiliated her, was now facing criminal charges, his wealth and power stripped away. The mansion that had once been his symbol of dominance became a hollow shell of what it had been. The wealth, the luxury, it was all gone, and he was left with nothing. Melissa didn't attend the hearings. She didn't need to. She had already won. Her victory wasn't about seeing him punished. It was about reclaiming her own life. It was about standing tall and showing the world, and herself, that she was no longer powerless. Months passed, and the dust settled. Chase Winters was a broken man. His wealth, his reputation, everything he had once thought was untouchable had been taken from him. The world had turned its back on him, and he was left to face the consequences of his own actions. As for Melissa, she had moved on. She left the mansion that had once been her prison. She found a new job, one that gave her respect, one where she wasn't invisible. She built a new life, one where she was in control. She didn't need revenge anymore. She had already claimed it. But there was one thing she would never forget. She had been underestimated. She had been crushed by the weight of others' judgment. But she had fought back. She had risen from the ashes and taken what was rightfully hers. And no one would ever make her feel small again.